In a quaint village, nestled on the outskirts of a dense and mysterious forest, lived a kind-hearted woman named Eleanor. Eleanor was well loved by her neighbors for her generous spirit and willingness to lend a helping hand. She lived in a cozy cottage with her loyal dog, Rufus, a fluffy terrier with a boundless enthusiasm for life. Eleanor's days were filled with tending to her vibrant garden, baking pies, and enjoying quiet walks in the woods. Yet, despite the peace and simplicity of her life, Eleanor often found herself dreaming of more. She yearned for wealth, believing that with money, she could escape the humdrum of daily chores and the ever-present worry of making ends meet. She imagined a life of luxury, where she wouldn't have to work so hard, where everything she desired would be within her reach. Sometimes, she dreamed of power, of being someone who mattered, someone whose name would be remembered and whose decisions could shape the world. These dreams lingered in her heart, casting a shadow on the contentment she might have otherwise felt. One crisp autumn afternoon, feeling particularly restless and weighed down by her thoughts, Eleanor decided to take a longer than usual walk in the woods. She had always found comfort in nature, the towering trees, the soft rustle of leaves underfoot, and the occasional glimpse of a deer darting between the trunks brought her a sense of peace. As she wandered deeper, she came upon a path she had never noticed before, one lined with ancient oaks whose branches intertwined overhead, creating a leafy tunnel that beckoned her forward. Curiosity got the better of her, and she followed the path, feeling a strange sense of anticipation building within her. The air grew still, and the usual forest sounds faded into a quiet hush. Just as she was beginning to wonder if she should turn back, a glimmer of light caught her eye. Beneath a pile of leaves and twigs, something sparkled faintly in the afternoon sun. Kneeling down, she brushed aside the debris to reveal a dusty, old lamp. The lamp was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was made of brass, intricately carved with swirling patterns that seemed to move as she looked at them. It had an odd allure, a pull that made Eleanor want to hold it, to inspect it closer. Smiling at the thought of finding such a peculiar treasure, she picked it up and gave it a gentle rub, hoping to clear away the years of grime. To her astonishment, the lamp began to vibrate in her hands, glowing with an otherworldly light that grew brighter and brighter until it burst into a plume of golden smoke. The smoke swirled and twisted, taking shape before her eyes, until a magnificent genie stood towering above her. He was adorned in robes that shimmered like the night sky, his eyes sparkling with a wisdom that spoke of countless centuries gone by. "Thank you for freeing me from my ancient prison, noble wanderer," the genie intoned, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the forest like distant thunder. "As a token of my gratitude, I shall grant you 3 wishes, anything your heart desires, no matter how grand or impossible." Eleanor stood speechless, her heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. She had heard tales of genies and wishes from childhood stories, but she never imagined she would find herself in such a fantastical situation. The possibilities seemed endless, her mind whirling with the enormity of what she had been offered. Here, in her hands, lay the power to change her life in ways she had only dreamed of. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor composed herself. Her dreams of wealth and comfort surged to the forefront of her mind, drowning out the doubts and questions that lingered at the edges of her thoughts. She looked up at the genie, her decision made. "I wish to be the richest person in the land," Eleanor declared, her voice steady despite the tremor of excitement that coursed through her. The genie's expression remained serene as he nodded. With a flourish of his hand, there was a brilliant flash of light, and Eleanor found herself standing not in the forest, but before a grand mansion that stretched as far as her eyes could see. The mansion was made of gleaming marble, with golden gates and sprawling gardens filled with exotic flowers she had never seen before. Her simple dress had transformed into a gown of the finest silk, adorned with jewels that sparkled in the sunlight. Inside the mansion, every room was filled with opulence, towering shelves lined with books bound in leather and gold, chandeliers that glimmered with thousands of crystals, and halls decorated with tapestries that told stories of ancient heroes and grand adventures. There were servants at her beck and call, ready to fulfill her every command, and a treasure room overflowing with gold coins, precious gems, and artifacts from faraway lands. For a while, Eleanor was elated. She threw lavish parties, inviting nobles, merchants, and entertainers from all corners of the kingdom. She dined on the finest foods, wore the most exquisite clothes, and indulged in every luxury she had ever dreamed of. The villagers who once knew her as the kind-hearted woman with a small cottage now saw her as an untouchable figure of wealth and grandeur. But as the days turned into weeks, Eleanor began to notice the subtle changes around her. Her parties, once filled with laughter and joy, now felt hollow and perfunctory. The guests who attended were more interested in her riches than in her company. They flattered her endlessly, but their words felt insincere, empty of the warmth of genuine friendship. Her old friends from the village stopped visiting, intimidated by her newfound status and overwhelmed by the walls of wealth that now surrounded her. Eleanor tried to fill the growing void with more luxuries, more jewels, more extravagant feasts, more possessions, but no matter how much she acquired, the emptiness remained. The mansion, once a symbol of her dreams fulfilled, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping her in a life that seemed increasingly devoid of meaning. Even Rufus, her loyal companion, seemed to sense her discontent, often curling up quietly at her feet, his once energetic spirit subdued by the heavy atmosphere of the grand halls. One evening, unable to bear the loneliness any longer, Eleanor wandered through her mansion's gardens, her steps aimless and her thoughts heavy. She found herself longing for the simplicity of her old life, the small joys of tending to her garden, the comfort of her modest cottage, and the genuine laughter shared with friends. She missed the feeling of being enough, of finding contentment in the little things. Determined to make a change, Eleanor returned to the forest with the lamp clutched tightly in her hand. She walked the familiar paths, the rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds offering her a fleeting sense of solace. Finding the spot where she had first discovered the lamp, she summoned the genie once more. The genie appeared before her, his expression calm as he awaited her next wish. Eleanor hesitated, the weight of her first wish's consequences still fresh in her mind. But she was determined to try again, convinced that perhaps what she truly needed was not wealth, but something even greater. "I wish to be the most powerful person in the world," Eleanor said, her voice tinged with both hope and a touch of desperation. The genie nodded, and with another wave of his hand, Eleanor's surroundings shifted once more. She now stood in a grand throne room, at the center of a palace that dwarfed even her previous mansion. She was adorned in robes of deep purple and gold, a crown encrusted with precious stones resting upon her head. She was no longer just Eleanor, she was now Queen Eleanor, ruler of a vast kingdom that stretched beyond the horizon. At her command were armies of knights, advisors who hung on her every word, and courtiers who bowed low as she passed. She had the power to make laws, to decide the fate of nations, to change the course of history with a single decree. The throne room buzzed with activity, ministers presenting reports, generals strategizing battles, and ambassadors seeking her favor. For a while, Eleanor felt the thrill of her new power. She relished in the respect she commanded, the authority that allowed her to shape the world as she saw fit. She worked tirelessly, striving to be a just and wise ruler. Hoping that through her power, she could make a real difference in the lives of her people, but soon, the weight of her responsibilities began to take its toll. Every decision she made had far-reaching consequences, and the pressure to always be right, to always know the best course of action, was overwhelming. She was surrounded by advisors, but the final choices were always hers, and the burden of leadership grew heavier with each passing day. She discovered that power did not bring her the connections she craved. People feared her more than they loved her. They obeyed her commands not out of respect, but out of fear of her authority. The courtiers flattered her, but their words were empty, and Eleanor found herself more isolated than ever. Even in a room full of people, she felt utterly alone. One night, as she sat on her throne, the grandeur of the palace felt stifling. The gold and jewels that once symbolized her power now seemed like chains, binding her to a life that was far from the happiness she had sought. She missed the genuine smiles, the small talks with her neighbors, and the simple, unpretentious joys of her old life. She realized that power, like wealth, was not the key to her happiness. It had given her authority, but it had taken away her freedom, her peace, and her sense of self. Desperate for a way out, Eleanor once again sought the familiar comfort of the forest. She wandered until she reached the spot where she had first found the lamp, the place where her journey had begun. With tears in her eyes, she called upon the genie for the third and final time. The genie appeared, his expression softening as he saw the turmoil in Eleanor's eyes. "You have one wish left," he said gently. "Choose wisely, for it will shape the rest of your life." Eleanor stood silently for a long moment, her mind racing as she reflected on all she had experienced. Wealth had brought her luxury, but it had stripped her of connection. Power had given her control, but it had stolen her peace. In chasing after what she thought she wanted, she had lost sight of what truly mattered. "I don't know what to wish for," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought wealth and power would make me happy, but I feel emptier than ever. I've lost myself in the pursuit of more, and I don't know how to find my way back." The genie listened patiently, then spoke with a gentle wisdom that cut through the fog of Eleanor's confusion. "The heart knows what it truly needs, even when the mind is clouded by desires. Perhaps it is not what you lack that you should seek, but rather what you already have." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the genie's words sink in. She thought of her old life, the life she had once taken for granted. She remembered the warmth of her little cottage, the joy of watching flowers bloom in her garden, the comforting routine of her daily chores, and the companionship of Rufus. She realized that in her pursuit of more, she had overlooked the richness of what she already possessed. Finally, with a deep breath, Eleanor made her third and final wish. "I wish to return to my old life, but this time, with a heart full of gratitude for all that I have." The genie smiled, and with a soft wave of his hand, Eleanor was back in her familiar surroundings. She stood in her cozy cottage, her simple dress replacing the royal robes, and Rufus greeted her with excited barks, his tail wagging furiously. The cottage, with its modest furnishings and the scent of fresh flowers from her garden, felt like a warm embrace, welcoming her back to the life she now knew she had always wanted. From that day forward, Eleanor approached each day with a renewed sense of appreciation. She found joy in the small things, the taste of freshly baked bread, the vibrant colors of her garden, the laughter of children playing in the village square, and the quiet moments shared with Rufus on her evening walks. She no longer yearned for wealth or power, for she had learned that true happiness was not found in what she didn't have, but in embracing and cherishing what she did. Eleanor continued to visit the woods, not out of restlessness, but out of a newfound love for the simple beauty of nature. She often sat under her favorite tree, reflecting on her journey and the lessons it had taught her. She knew now that the pursuit of more could easily lead one astray, pulling them away from the very things that bring true contentment. She had discovered that gratitude was the key to a fulfilled life, and that feeling enough was a gift she could give herself each day. Eleanor lived the rest of her days with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit at peace, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had found her way back to herself, and in doing so, she had discovered the greatest treasure of all, the joy of simply being, of living in the moment, and of appreciating the beauty of her own ordinary, extraordinary life.